Good morning and welcome to yet another Focus edition. This time around, focusing on a working nation. Obviously, we do aim to leave you a little bit more enlightened at the end of the show. My name is Glenora Shipura, and on the other side of the break, I will be in a conversation with Chantel Hasselman from PwC Namibia. Do stay tuned for this.
Empowering Namibian businesses for the fifth industrial revolution. At Salt Essential IT, our mission is to harness technology to empower Namibian businesses and communities, enhancing cybersecurity and driving digital transformation. Over the years, we have enabled Namibia to safely utilize the internet to revolutionize lives and enterprises. iSecure bot cybersecurity. Send a WhatsApp hello text to +2648517328873. iSecureBot offers an interactive platform for parents, children and businesses to question and receive information, guidance, links to training and informational videos and so much more. Join the AI revolution. Scan the code to sign up for a free AI enablement.
I'm now joined by Chantel Hasselman from PwC Namibia. She is a tax partner, but I would like her to actually formally introduce herself and, so I don't get any of the title wrong.
Thank you for the opportunity, Glenora, and welcome to our viewers as well. So yes, I'm country senior partner at PwC Namibia, where we have offices based in Windhoek and in Walvis Bay as well. But specifically for today's conversation, having on my hat as the tax partner for PwC Namibia.
Oh, great. I did love the insert, rather, in this Focus edition from your team. And you guys are talking about the budget and also talking about the tax in general. What are the key highlights of the 2025/2026 Namibian budget presented by Erika Shavuda, and how does it compare to previous years? I mean, this was presented by the Minister of Finance a little bit earlier this year.
Yes. So it is to us a continuous conversation of national interest. And through today's insert and the follow-up through today's conversation, also a focus on how we can take it from the formal tabling of the budget into a further dissect, where it is easier for households as well as employed individuals, as well as the smaller business sector of our economy, together with students and scholars. So, from a different perspective, how that dissect can just be made easier and enhanced. So hopefully that through this week and today's intervention, that we can also all just have an enhanced understanding and take a deeper dive into that understanding.
Yes, and that's the thing with some of these things, especially the youth. We don't have a bigger grasp of what does this budget for this year mean for the country, for the economy, for us. And it's great that you are here joining us and, and dissecting and going further into these discussions. And it's very important, actually. That's what I'm trying to highlight, to have this type of discussions.
Yeah. But thank you for the opportunity. And I come alone this morning, but I am supported back at the office with a tax team who is annually fully committed towards, from the afternoon of the budget being tabled into that dissect. So just circling to your question, the 25-26 budget was tabled under the theme Beyond 35, also speaking to the country's journey of years post-independence, and themed for a prosperous future. So through that, the focus and the challenge also remained in how to make sure Namibia can be an inclusive and equitable economy, how we can better address unemployment, and how we can stimulate much needed economic growth.
I think that draws me into the next question, because what are these projected revenue outlook for Namibia in 2025 and 2026? And also, again, I like that we need to compare it to previous years. What changes are we going to see, if any, and how do we see Namibia ahead of this 2025-2026 budget?
Yes, thanks for the question. So if we stand still at revenue projections as given through in the budget, it is budgeted for a 4.9% increase in revenue. So that is projected revenue of 92 billion Namibian dollar. The increase being mostly centered around the ability to generate more tax revenue, because Namibia as a country still finds itself pretty much dependent on the ability to generate tax revenue, tax revenue being more than 90% of total government revenue. So that just placed the focus on the importance of making sure that we have economic activity within the country, and also regional trade and global trade, so that the various taxes as legislated we can have optimum collection on that. So to be specific, what type of tax revenue makes up the 90% more or less of the 92 billion. So that is typical customs and excise duties, which reaches Namibia via the SACU revenue pool, which also annually attracts a lot of conversation on its own. So it is depicted that about 25% of our total tax revenue will be earned or generated from the SACU pool. Followed by that is an increased estimate of 27% coming from value-added tax. So that means that a lot of local consumption of goods and services by households, together with the impact that tourists makes in terms of their local spending, that is actually the big drive in terms of the projections of VAT revenue. And just to say that for Namibia, we do not have the conversation on the table of having a potential increase in our VAT rate, which has been 15% since the inception of VAT in Namibia. Followed by that is a 25% projection of revenue from pay as you earn. So that means the employed must remain employed, and even unemployment should be reduced, because that is a target set out in the budget in terms of the ability to generate tax revenue, and 16% would comprise corporate taxes, which also speaks to the need of having more business activity and attracting foreign investment into the country, as that fuels the ability to generate more corporate taxes.
Now, going back to the budget and also just going through sort of on a microscopic lens, against this budgeted revenue, what is the planned operational and development expenditure?
So as you rightfully said, with the backdrop of the revenue, we can anticipate an increased expenditure. If I set aside the interest payments servicing our debt, if I leave that out, it's about 80 billion allocated to the operational expenditure budget, of which 37 billion of the 80 billion is set aside for personnel expenditure, which is also an indicator continuously under discussion. And then 12.8 billion denoted to the development budget. So specific to note for this year's budget is approximated 22.6% increase in terms of our development budget, also placing a strong emphasis on productive spending and making sure we can have high execution rate on the projects that's earmarked under the infrastructure or development budget.
Definitely. So still on that question, you did say 22.6% increase from the previous budgets in terms of just the development aspect, expenditure rather. Does this mean, or I mean, just in terms of forecast, are we going to see more developed projects, more youth-led projects? I did see, because we did a little bit on the budget, there was an allocation around sports facilities, and the youth are generally, excited about that. And the reason I bring this up is just so that if somebody who's my age and maybe younger, and they're just like, what does this mean for us? Knowing that there is an increase in terms of the developmental budget for the country. What does this mean? Is it going to be more projects that we're going to see, more opportunities for the youth, and so forth. Could we just have a little bit of an overview on that?
Yes. So yes, so there are projects earmarked that specifically can create job opportunities. For example, mention was made in terms of the railway infrastructure development spending that's planned there. But specific mention again, just to align it more to the youth's dreams as well, would be a specific mention of the upgrade or the construction of 2 sports fields or facilities. So this was also not the first budget year where there was a mention of, for example, the upgrade to the Independence Stadium in Windhoek as well. But so it is a positive is that it's again high on the radar and it's mentioned and earmarked. The challenge is just in terms of the execution rate and ensuring that we can have that productive spending coming through under the auspice of the development budget.
That's also the one other fear. Are we able to afford it, as a country? Getting into my next question, how does this budget plan to manage the fiscal deficit, and what are the implications for public debt compared to previous years?
Yeah, so if you take the quick rundown we just had in terms of total budgeted expense, definitely exceeds the budgeted revenue, which leads Namibia into a budgeted fiscal deficit. To quantify that, it's about 10.5 billion for 25-26, which is a slight increase from our estimated budget deficit of 8.8 billion for 24-25. So to manage this, it is important to focus on reducing debt as a proportion of GDP. So various strategies mentioned in terms of approaches to retain this fiscal stance and sustainability. So to be more specific, within the budget year, there is earmarked a significant debt settlement on the 29th of October 2025 of Namibia's euro bond to the value of $750 million. And that will then effectively see a reduction of the estimated debt to GDP from 66 to 62%, which will be a positive movement, having a decline in the debt to GDP indicator, because also important to note that the budgeted cost of servicing our debt is 14.7 billion for the current year, which is also an important key indicator for the country to track and monitor, and specifically since you ask from an affordability, because that's the cost of having the debt. On the upside, a last remark would be that with that debt settlement by October, the country's total debt stock, the outlook will be that more than 80% of that stems from domestic debt, as opposed to foreign debt, which is a bit of an insulation against the risks of exchange rate changes, fluctuations.
All right. Now, what are the main risks to Namibia's economic outlook, and how is the government planning to mitigate them compared to previous years?
So two definitely worth mentioning is global trade policy shifts. I think like week by week it unfolds as we are exposed, for example, to what is happening with the US tariff changes, and then also potential disruptions. A lot of mention and focus on that in terms of this year's budget was disruptions in terms of diamond exports, in terms of the commodity prices there. So a theme from the budget is mitigating this risk by keep on focusing how we can diversify the Namibian economy, and also invest in non-traditional sectors, or also enhancing a big focus in terms of enhancing regional trade relations. So to make sure that with the ongoing conversation of the Africa Free Trade Agreements, and also what is Namibia's position on that, and at what speed are we participating? and unlocking potential opportunities.
I must say that most Namibians, maybe I might be not speaking for everybody, but we have had conversations around this, and generally people are excited what this could mean for Namibia, because it does look like it's a new administration and there are changes being implemented, and it feels, I don't want to say drastic, but it feels like we're seeing positive changes, and there's excitement around this. Of course, you and I are still in conversation, but we will first go for a quick ad break before we continue with the rest of the conversation.
SeaWorks Cares. Your generous donations help to feed kids, help to keep kids in school, help kids to graduate, help future generations succeed. All donations go to fund our school feeding program, which help to keep children in school and get a good education for a better tomorrow. Make a difference today. Contact SeaWorks Cares Fund. Join us in our mission to make a difference, one meal, one child, one school at a time. Together, we can nourish futures and empower communities. We support 6 remote schools across Namibia to serve over 1,800 learners with healthy meals daily. Visit seaworkscares.com or scan the QR code.
I'm still in conversation with Chantal Hasselman from PwC, a senior tax partner. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Awesome. Getting right back into our conversation, how does the 2025 to 2026 budget address social welfare and healthcare, and how do these allocations compare to previous years? I know we did touch a little bit on the youth in terms of the allocation on the sport or the sports sector. We talked about the stadiums, and some allocation was also around creating football matches and football leagues and et cetera. So let's just expand on that conversation.
Yes, so pretty much aligned with previous budgets as tabled. With the 25-26 budget, there is also a significant focus on social welfare and healthcare, with substantial increased allocations to these sectors. So the allocation of 15.2 billion is denoted to various social welfare programs. And that is then, just to put context to that, so that is up from 13.8 billion in the 24-25 budget. And then if I cross over to healthcare, spending has also seen a significant increase, so that's about a billion increase, 11.3 to 12.3 in terms of the 25-26 budgets. So these increased allocations definitely reflect government's commitment to improving the quality for all Namibians and ensuring that there's access to essential services. But again, also the same conversation we just had on the development budget. The focus should be in terms of the execution rate under these budget allocations.
Exactly, and that is a major concern. Everybody is excited for the changes and for these announcements, rather. Let me not say changes, but for these announcements. But they are worried in terms of, is this going to bear fruits? Are we going to see it executed to the full extent? And that is a question that only time will tell.
Yes.
But yeah, like it's something that we can't know till, time has passed.
Yes. So whether it's a new district hospital or whether it is just upgrades to existing state hospitals, I think that is the much needed action.
That is the much needed action. And yes, like you said, it's more on the operational side. Like
yes.
We need to see it bear fruits. Now, getting to my next question, how does the 2025-2026 budget address tax policy, and what are the key changes compared to previous years? Are there any changes actually?
Yeah, this being our biggest focus as a tax consultant. So this is my area. So yeah, but so to your question, it was a very busy budget from a tax announcement perspective. So a lot that we can expect, whether it's companies, for example, non-diamond mining companies, can still expect to see that much awaited reduction in their corporate tax rate. So that's from 30% to 28% by 2026. So that is also a positive in terms of the attractiveness of doing business in country. But on the other side of that, in terms of broadening the tax base, there's again an announcement, and this is not a first announcement. And the challenges will lie in the actual legal drafting thereof and the relevant interpretation and application. And that is the announcement to have a withholding or a dividend tax on local dividends, mentioned at 10%. So that will be totally new for Namibia. And then on the value added tax side, also two possible amendments that was named, which will be new to Namibia, is the ability for us to operate with having electronic invoices and real-time VAT reporting, which is also unfolding in developed countries at this stage. So significant effort needs to go into the research and the drafting and the implementation of that. And together with that is also the considering of having a VAT on digital taxes under the VAT Act, which is not new to the African conversation. A lot of African countries already having legislation on that, but definitely new to Namibia.
Now, getting into a question that I think everybody is eager for, any tax announcements specifically concerning individuals and households? I mean, as a tax-paying member of society, I would want to get right into it because we want to know.
Yes. So households are majorly impacted by our spending. So that is where, from a tax perspective, the local VAT rate plays an important role without me and you realizing, because you have your personal monthly spending and then you buy VAT inclusive goods and services. So on the upside of that, we, as I said earlier in our conversation, we do not anticipate an increase in our 15% VAT rate. So I think we also need to stand still and just acknowledge that as local consumers of goods and services.
So we can have a sigh of relief.
Yes, because despite inflationary pressure in terms of increases in specifically food products, we do not foresee that there's a immediate increase in our VAT rate. But then also in terms of corporate tax, the monthly employee taxes that's payable, a slight disappointment in the fact that for this current tax year, we do not anticipate a further change in terms of our tax brackets like we experienced last year, where the minimum threshold increased from 50 to 100,000, and you might recall the tax benefit that came through.
Yes, we enjoyed those.
Being on a break a bit.
We enjoyed those. It paid for a few things. Maybe frivolous spending, but it is what it is.
Yeah. So that adjustment does help on the personal budget in terms of countering the effect of inflation in goods and services. So we will not have the same experience for the current tax year. However, the positive is that it is announced over the medium-term framework, the next two fiscal years, that we can expect a year-on-year increment of that threshold and adjustment to the brackets.
Okay, awesome. So we will be, keeping a watch on that. So we are obviously running out of time, but before I let you go, I mean, how does the tax amnesty work, and is it applicable to individuals? Again, this is a question that we are all eager to, get answers to. Yeah.
Yes, we also get that question often, and it learns me not to just which things I might take as obvious, but to make sure that we can break down that message and share it. So thanks for that question. It's definitely applicable to individuals, CCs, close corporations, CCs, PTYs, and it's still running until October 2026. So the message is to make sure that if you have returns outstanding, if you have tax balances payable, that you'll need to have those submitted, and you will need to settle the tax amount, and that then you can apply for the amnesty, and that will lead to an automated waiving of the penalties and interest. So in essence, it is the most affordable method of coming clean and being in a good standing and a good standing corporate citizen. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. We have definitely run out of time, but I think we've covered quite a lot, and I'm so grateful that I've had this conversation with you. And obviously, my goal here and the goal of the show is to leave the viewer a little bit more enlightened than when we met them. Any final remarks before I let you go?
Yeah, I think it's just the team effort as fellow Namibians that's needed in terms of making sure that the good expressed per the budget, the strategies can produce long-term stability and achieving the targets we set out for ourselves as a nation. And I definitely look forward to continue that conversation. Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure having you. From me, Glenn Rashipura. Until next time.